He remembers the door. He does not remember what he did behind it.
Evening, folks. You found your way back to whaint radio, 91.5 on the dial. Welcome back to the Midnight Holler. Still dark outside, still dark in here, but you already knew that, didn't you? Last time we spoke, I had to let you go on account of those bells ringing. Well, nothing terrible has happened so far, not yet anyway. But the night is young, and you and I both know that by the end of tonight's broadcast, something is bound to happen. I've been feeling restless lately. You ever feel restless? You lie down at night, close your eyes, and suddenly every thought you managed to outrun during the day comes crawling back into bed beside you. Every mistake, every regret, every conversation you wish had ended differently. Maybe sleep ain't peace. Maybe it's just a few hours when our memories finally get tired of chasing us. Didn't know I was going to get all philosophical on you. I received another listener question. At least, I believe it came from a listener. Found it sitting beneath the transmitter this morning, in an envelope of all things. Just a little folded piece of paper with 6 words written across it. How do you sleep at the station? That's a fair question. You guys crack me up. Jonah, how do you eat? How do you use the bathroom? I guess I'll answer your question, friend. Well, I suppose the answer depends on what you mean by sleep. There's a narrow cot in the room behind Studio A. Might have belonged to an engineer once. Springs are mostly gone, and one of the legs is propped up with an old telephone directory from Birmingham. 1974. Never met anyone from Birmingham, but I know quite a few of their phone numbers now. I usually lie down after the broadcast. I take my boots off, set my hat on the chair beside me, and I leave the hallway light burning. Not because I'm afraid of the dark. I've simply had enough of it. Sometimes I sleep for an hour, sometimes 5. Time doesn't behave properly here, so it's difficult to say. I've had dreams that seem to last for weeks, only to wake and find the second hand on the clock hadn't moved. Other times, I close my eyes for what feels like a moment and wake to find dust covering the... Hold on. Do you hear that? No. Marianne? Marianne?
There you are.
Marianne?
I've been calling you.
Where are you?
You know where I am. Below you. Waiting where you left me. Studio B.
I heard you before.
You heard me, and still you did not come.
I don't know what's down there.
You know what is down here. You simply do not know what it remembers. What will it cost you, Jonah? Another night? Another story? Another room filled with strangers listening while your wife waits beneath your feet? What is more important than me?
Nothing. Nothing is.
Then why am I still alone?
Marianne, please.
You never denied me anything. Do you remember? When I asked you to dance in the kitchen, you danced. When I asked you to drive through the night because I wanted to see the ocean at sunrise, you drove. When I asked you to sit beside me because I was frightened, you held my hand until morning. I have only asked one thing of you since I died. Come downstairs.
I'm afraid.
So was I. I was afraid in that hospital room. I was afraid when the medicine stopped working. I was afraid when I looked into your eyes and realized you already knew I was leaving. But I did not turn away from you. Why are you turning away from me?
I'm not. I would never.
You are sitting beneath the red light, telling stories, so you do not have to remember your own.
That isn't true, Marianne.
Then open the door. Come see what you did.
What I did?
You promised you would never leave me in the dark.
Marianne, wait.
You never told them how I truly died.
What are you talking about?
You never told yourself.
Marianne! 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 I'm coming! No. No. Not yet.
He locked the door while I was still breathing.
I'm sorry. I suppose there's no sense pretending anymore. Some of you have heard her. I know you have. Her voice has been coming through the broadcast for the past several weeks. Sometimes beneath the music, sometimes inside the stories. I thought perhaps the sound wasn't being transmitted, but your letters came. Some of you have asked about the woman humming behind me. Some of you have heard her say my name. I never answered those letters. I didn't want to face what was happening. I wanted to believe the station was playing another trick on me. It does that. It finds something you miss and puts it just beyond your reach. But I know Marianne's voice. I would know it through a hurricane. I would know it beneath the sound of the whole world ending. And that was her. The first time I heard her, I nearly ran down there without thinking. Then, she called me a liar. The next time, she called me a murderer. I didn't tell you because I was afraid of what you might think. Afraid you would hear that voice and believe her. Afraid you might start listening to these broadcasts and wonder whether the man behind this microphone deserves to be trapped here. Maybe some of you are wondering that now. I wish I could tell you with certainty that she's wrong. I wish I could swear there isn't some terrible truth waiting behind that basement door. But memories are strange things in this place. Mine are fading. I remember our first kiss. She tasted like peppermint. I remember how nervous I was. I remember her smiling against my lips because she knew it. And I remember holding her hand when she died. I remember the hospital window, the pale morning light, the sound of the oxygen machine. I remember telling her it was all right to let go, even though every part of me, every fiber of my being wanted to beg her to stay. I remember loving her. I remember taking care of her. I remembered grieving until grief became the only thing left inside me. Those memories feel honest. They feel like mine. But there are others now, darker ones. Memories I don't recognize when they first arrive. I'm going to be honest with you, friends. Judge me however you want, I don't care. But I have seen myself standing inside Studio B, I have seen blood on my hands. I have heard Mary Ann crying on the other side of the glass while I shut down the soundboard. I have remembered locking that basement door. And sometimes I remember her pounding against it. I don't know whether those things happened. I don't know whether the station planted them inside me. Or maybe I have simply spent 50 years running from something I already know. Memories are supposed to be eternal, aren't they? The body fails, photographs fade, names disappear from headstones. But what we remember, what we carry of the people we loved, that is supposed to remain. It has to remain. Tonight's story is about memory, about the moments that build a life, about the things we are willing to surrender to escape pain, and about something ancient beneath the earth that learned memories could be eaten. This account arrived on a damaged reel from a cave system whose name had been scratched away, forgotten. 4 people entered those caves, only 1 returned. And according to him, the worst thing waiting underground wasn't death. It was forgetting there had ever been a life worth returning to. The title written on the reel is Something Ancient in the Caves Feasted on Our Memories. Hopefully, you won't easily forget this one. This is broadcast 010, and you're listening to the Midnight Holler. See you on the other side of the static.
He tells the wedding correctly. He tells the hospital incorrectly. Ask him where the medicine went.
The Midnight Holler, broadcast 10. Something ancient in the caves feasted on our memories. Told by Dexter Lewis of Lumpkin County, Georgia. The story that I'm about to tell you is true. You don't have to believe it all. You can believe some or none of it at all. I don't really care. But it is a true story. Before I get into this account, I want you to know that I understand many of you have grandmothers or grandfathers who may be here today struggling with dementia or have passed. It could be recent, it could be many years back. But trust me when I tell you that I know what that pain feels like. I know how hard it is. I know how hard it is and difficult it is to go through it day after day, week after week. And with all that said, this story is for you. I hope and I pray that you can think of it and listen to it and know that they are still close to you, wherever they are. I was 23 the first time I watched somebody disappear without ever leaving the room. Movies get it wrong, you know? In a movie, somebody forgets in one big scene and there's always music under it and everybody in the room knows what they're watching while it happens. Big surprise, it's not like that. Nobody goes all at once. They tend to go on a Tuesday, maybe just a little bit, and then again some other Tuesday. And the pieces are small enough that you can talk yourself out of them. A name first, usually, and then what year it is. My grandmother forgot the word for spoon one time and called it the little shovel, and we both laughed about that. I laughed. And then that night, I was laying there thinking about how she had laughed maybe half a second after I did, like she was waiting to see if it was funny. I figured that was the worst thing that was ever going to happen to me. I want to say something before I start, and then I'll leave it alone. Some of what you're about to hear I lived through. Some of it I only know because I wrote it down at the time, and I've had to take my own word for it. And there's a stretch in October I don't have at all. It's not blurry, it's just absolutely gone. So take it for what it's worth. That's the best I can do. My mom called me on the 9th of September. It was a Thursday at 6:40 in the evening. I know that because I was standing in the parking lot of the Kroger in Marietta with a bag of ice against my leg, and the bag had a tear in the corner, and it was 91 degrees on the bank sign across the road. I'm giving you all of this detail on purpose. It won't be like that later. She said Grandma had gone walking again, 4 miles this time, barefoot, of all things. Apparently, a deputy had picked her up out on Copperhead Road at daylight, with her nightgown wet up to the knee and her hands cupped in front of her, like she was carrying water in them. He asked where she was going, and she told him she was late, and Harold didn't like to be kept waiting. And she was right. My grandfather, Harold, did not like to be kept waiting. He was a punctual man, the kind of guy who would rather go just sit in the truck and start it up while waiting on her to finish her makeup, even if it was a 30-minute wait. The thing is, my grandfather had been dead for 11 years. I said I'd come up. I had a job I didn't care about and a rent that I couldn't cover. And underneath all that, I had the guilt, which is really why anybody volunteers for anything, I think. 2 years my family had been rotating through that house. It's sad to say, but we treated it like community service. My aunt did a month. Mom did about 6 weeks. My cousin lasted 9 days. Everybody had gone but me, and nobody had said it out loud, which is worse than if they had. I told her a week. Then right before she hung up, she got quiet. She said my name and then didn't say anything for a second.
Dex, if she tells you somebody's breathing outside, just tell her it's the wind. Please don't argue with her. Don't go look. Promise me.
I laughed at her. I did. I asked what I was supposed to do if it was the wind.
Then at least you won't have to lie to her.
Then she hung up. I drove up on Saturday morning, 400 north until the shopping centers quit, and then the 2-lane. It rained a little around Dawsonville and then quit, and then seemed like it couldn't decide. 2 things to note about that drive. There's a stretch up there where there used to be a peach stand every half mile. People selling out of the back of a truck, peaches and boiled peanuts and jam and whatever jars they had. Every one of them was still standing, and every one of them was just empty, like a ghost town. They weren't tore down, they weren't for sale, they were just sitting there with the plywood going soft. Then about 4 miles out from her place, I noticed that the mailboxes were all open. Not a few of them, mind you, but all of them. Every box on that road hanging open with the door down and the rain going in. I drove for maybe 2 miles like that at about 30, telling myself it was probably just kids. I mean, kids is what you say when you're 23 and you need a reason, right? I never did find out what that was. You might hear me say that a few times. Her place is up a gravel drive off the county road. 11 acres that her dad left her. Orchard on the south slope. House facing the creek. White clapboard, tin roof, and a porch that runs the whole front and sags in the middle just a bit. I parked and got out, and the rain had stopped and it was really quiet. There are footprints in the mud between my car and the porch steps. Barefoot, deep ones. Toes spread out wide, the way feet get when somebody doesn't wear shoes much. They came out of the tree line at the edge of the yard and crossed the grass and crossed the mud and stopped at the bottom step. The first thing I noticed is they were pretty big. They definitely weren't my grandmother's. I put my boot down beside one to check. I wear an 11, mind you. And they were about the same size. I stood there, working on that for a while. Somebody from the church checking on her maybe. A neighbor. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe somebody who walked up barefoot in the rain and went to the porch and then, what? Went inside? Got picked up? Who knows? What I decided was he left down the driveway and the rain took those prints and not these. I want you to see me put that together because I'm going to do it again about 40 more times. Anyway, after all of this, I finally went into the house. She was at the sink with the water running over her wrists, and she turned around and looked at me, and her whole face just lit up. "Harold," she said. 11 years, and she said it like he'd been out in the barn. Then something moved behind her eyes and stepped back, and then came up again as somebody else, and she immediately said, "Dexter, my Dexter Ray." She grabbed both my arms, and I stood in my grandmother's kitchen and cried like a kid. She fed me, like she always does, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, sliced peaches out of a bowl, and a piece of cobbler she said she had made that morning and hadn't. It had gone glassy on top, but I ate every bite and told her it was perfect, and that wasn't a lie exactly. She asked me how the drive was. 20 minutes later, she asked again. 20 minutes after that, she looked at me over her cup, pleasant as could be, and said, "Now when's my grandson getting here? Dexter. He called and he said he was going to come." And I chuckled lightly and said, "He'll be along directly." I could have told her the truth and watched her be scared and embarrassed for about 40 seconds until it went away again, but I didn't. The house was the same house. That's what got me. Same wallpaper with the little blue cornflowers on it, same Bible on the same doily, coffee and cut peaches and old paper and the cedar smell out of the hall closet. Her whole life sitting right where she had left it, and her walking around in the middle of it, not knowing what room came next. It was almost dark before I noticed the frames. She's got picture frames on every flat surface in that house. There's 11 on the piano nobody's played since I don't know when. A whole wall of them in the hallway. Mantle, side tables, top of the china cabinet. All of them were empty. They were standing up, dusted, arranged, glass clean, and behind the glass, that gray cardboard that come with them from the store. I went down the hall touching them one at a time like an idiot, I guess. 40-something, all empty. I asked her that evening, carefully. You kind of learn how to ask. She looked at the mantle a while. Her hand came up toward one of them and stopped. "I took those down," she said. "I think I took those down." "How come, Grandma?" "Because I kept looking at them and not knowing, and it wasn't fair to them." We'll come back to that, but right now, I gotta tell you about the orchard. Harold Lewis put 51 peach trees on that south slope. One the year they got married and one every year after, and he dug every single one of those holes himself. The rows are crooked. He did that on purpose. He used to say straight rows were for men getting paid by somebody else. My grandmother, she went out there every morning I was there. Before coffee, sometimes before it was light outside. She'd walk the rows with a bucket she hardly ever put anything in, and she'd put her hand flat on every trunk going down the line. All 51 of them. I asked her one time what she was doing. "Well, they can't be neglected." "Yes, ma'am, but what for?" And she stood there in the wet grass with her hand on the tree and went looking for it and didn't come up with it. She got that look in her eye. It's worse than being confused. It's the one where they know the shape of what's missing, but they can't recall it. "I don't recall," she said. "But it's important, Dex. It's about the most important thing there is." I put it down as habit. The body doing what the mind can't. That's the thing they tell you happens, and it does happen. I had it backwards. She wasn't tending those trees. She was counting them. 51 trees for 51 years. And she was going out there every morning to make sure the number hadn't dropped. It had. She just couldn't have told you which ones were gone. But I didn't work that out for another 6 weeks. My first night I was there, she started locking up at 6:40 and it was still light out. I know the time because I checked my phone, thinking she'd got turned around about the hour. But she wasn't turned around. She had a route. Front door, deadbolt, chain. Kitchen door, deadbolt. Then a ladder-back chair off the table, tipped up under the knob, and she said it with a little shove of her hip, like she'd done it 10,000 times. Every window downstairs, sash locked, then the curtains, room by room, and after she pulled them, she'd run her hand down the middle where they'd met, just to make sure there wasn't a gap. She did the whole thing without hurrying, and without saying a word. Then she sat down in her chair by the wood stove and folded her hands and looked at the wall. Around 9, she said, "There he is." "Ma'am?" "Just listen." So I listened. Refrigerator, the moth hitting the porch light, the creak, somebody's dog way off, house noises. "I don't hear anything, Grandma." She turned her head slowly and looked at me with about the most patience anybody's ever had with me. "You're not listening for anything," she said. "You're listening for between." She held up one finger. So I sat there and I did it. I quit listening for a sound and listened for where sound wasn't. I didn't hear her breathing that night, but I did notice something, and I only noticed it because she told me how. Out past the porch and the yard, up where the ground starts climbing towards the ridge, the crickets weren't going. Not all of them, a patch, maybe 50 yards across, sitting up there in the dark, everything around it going full blast. Then the patch moved. Not fast, about like a man walks. "Grandma, there's an animal up on the hill." She didn't look away from the wall. "The wind doesn't wait for you to breathe first." Then she got up and kissed the top of my head, and she told me she was proud of me and called me by my uncle's name, and then went to bed. I sat up until 2 with every light in the house on. At some point, I got up and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the yard and the tree line and the shape of the ridge past that, and I thought about those prints coming out of the woods and stopping at the porch and not going back. And then I did what you do. I put a story on it so I could go to sleep. I don't think that was stupid of me. I was tired from the drive, and I was in my grandmother's house, and I was doing the arithmetic in the dark to make it come out to dementia, which it was. That's the thing. I just didn't know yet that I was doing the forgetting. A week turned into 2 the way it does. I called my job on a Tuesday and quit it on a Thursday. Mom cried on the phone and said she'd send money, and I told her not to, and she did anyway. We got a routine going. Pills in the morning with a coffee, walk the orchard, sit on the porch, and she'd tell stories, the same 4 stories. And I got where I could hear them like they were new, because to her, they were. Lunch, then the afternoon, which was long. She'd doze in her chair, and I'd just sit in a house full of clocks. And every evening at 6:40, the locks. I quit trying to talk her out of it after the first few nights. They tell you in the pamphlets, don't correct, but redirect. It's good advice for the reason they give you, and also for another reason, which is that sometimes you'll be correcting somebody like that and get the feeling that you're the one being handled. Here's what started happening. I'm giving it to you the order that I caught on to it, which isn't the order it was happening in. Mud in the house, inside. Mornings mostly. Red clay, that Georgia red that gets in the grout and stays there, and little half circles on the hall runner and on the kitchen floor. One time, a smear of it in the bathroom sink like somebody washed up in a hurry. Every door still locked, windows latched. Chair still under the kitchen knob at the same angle she set it. I checked her feet twice while she was sleeping. They were clean. Then pine needles in the hallway. Long ones, long leaf. There's no long leaf on that property. It's all short leaf and hardwood on that slope. And the closest I ever found any was over on the other side of the ridge past where the trail gives out. I found them 3 times, always in the hallway. Not in a line, just scattered, like they came out of a cuff or a pocket. Now let's talk about the jars. She'd come in off her orchard walk carrying a mason jar with the lid down tight and set it on the counter and then go on about her morning. Peach pits in them, little flat creek stones. Sometimes a square of paper folded so many times it had gone soft like a cloth. I asked her about the first one when she brought it in. She looked at it like it was somebody else's. "Oh, somebody else left that," she said. Over about 11 days, I took 6 of them off that counter. I never once saw her fill one, and they weren't her jars. Hers are ball, the new ones with the blue lids. These jars were old, with the zinc lids gone chalky, the kind you find moonshine in out in a barn. I lined all 6 up on the shelf over the washer, and then one morning there were 7. My grandfather Harold had a workshop, as most men do, located right next to the house. His is a cinder block building, right behind the house, and the door swelled up so bad you have to lift it to pull it. It still smelled like him in there, sawdust and that oil he used and cold concrete. Everything hanging right where he left it, and the outlines drawn on the pegboard in marker so you'd know what went there. 3 things in there weren't his. First, a coffee can of nails, Old ones, cut nails, square-shanked, rusted about the color of dried blood. Come out of a house older than that house for sure. Somebody had been counting them out on the workbench in little piles, 7 to a pile, 9 piles, and then a 10th one with 4 in it, like she got called away. Secondly, there was a spool of red thread, thick cotton, quilting thread, and it was about half gone. And third, the mason jars, zinc lids, 24 of them washed and turned upside down on a towel to dry like a woman fixing to put up preserves or something. I gently walked her out there and asked about the nails. She picked one up and turned it over, and her thumb went straight to the point of it to test it. Knew exactly what she was doing with it. "You put them where it comes across," she said. "Where what comes across, Grandma?" "I don't know. I knew yesterday." Now the breathing. Night 1, I heard nothing. Night 2, I heard nothing, and then I heard something, and I don't know how to split that any finer. It was that quiet patch again, and inside the quiet patch, something moving. Sort of a slow, heavy sound like a tarp shifting. Could have been wind in the laurel, except it was a still night. I wrote it down and left it alone. Night 3, I went out on the porch. 10:30 or so. Cold for September. I could see my breath under the porch light going out in front of me, and out past the rail where the yard turns into trees, I heard it plain. In and out, big and slow. I stood still and it kept on, and my heart was going, and for whatever reason I thought bear. There's bear all over that county. That's definitely a bear. So I did what you do with a bear. I got big and hollered at it. It stopped. I stood there with my hands up in the dark, feeling stupid. And then I let out the breath that I'd been holding. And right on cue, it breathed. Right then, right after me. I did it again on purpose, a little short one, watching the white of it go out over the rail. And it breathed. I held my breath. Nothing, not a thing, for about the longest 20 seconds of my life. And when I finally couldn't hold it in anymore and I let it go, it sure as heck went with me, right behind, half a beat off, like somebody learning a dance step off you. I don't remember getting back in the house. I do remember standing in the front room with my back on the door and my grandmother out in the hall in her nightgown looking at me. She didn't say she told me so. She only said, "Oh, honey, don't answer it." I went to town the next day because I needed to be around people. Delonia is a square with a courthouse in the middle and a bunch of gold rush tourist business laid over the top of hill country. I bought feed I didn't need, stood in the hardware store looking at fence staples for 25 minutes. And that's where I met Elias Morgan. He was 70-something, bulldog's cap gone gray. Biggest hands I've ever seen on a man that size. He looked at me and said, "You're Margaret Lewis's grandbaby." We got to talking. He'd known Harold, helped him plant some years, the way neighbors did. He asked how she was, and I gave him the answer you give, and he listened to the whole thing, which usually people don't. Then he said, "Is she still going up behind the creek?" I said, "Sir?" And he let that lay there. He brought me a cup of coffee at the place on the square and told me one story. Just the one. Slow. The way those men like to tell stories, leaving about a third of it out on purpose. "Old folks used to say the mountains don't eat people." He turned his cup a quarter turn on the saucer. "Said it eats the place where people keep each other alive." I laughed. But he didn't laugh. He waited till I was done, polite about it, and then he said, "Tell me about your great-grandmother's laugh." I opened my mouth. Here's the thing. I knew my great-grandmother, Nana Ruth. She was alive till I was about 14. Kept butterscotch in a candy dish shaped like a swan. Called everybody Sugarfoot. She laughed all the time at everything. That was the whole woman. And I sat there in a coffee shop and went after the sound of it, and there wasn't anything there. Not faded, not a bad recording, just nothing. I sat there working my jaw, He watched me do it. He didn't look smug about it, and he didn't look sorry either, and after a while, he just nodded once and drank his coffee. On my way out, he said one more thing. This is word for word. I wrote it on a receipt out in the truck. If she goes out after dark, you follow her if you have to, but don't you call her name out there, not one time. I asked him why. Because something up there will hear how much you mean it. She went out on a Thursday. I had been sleeping on the couch in the front room, which is how I heard the chair. She took it down real careful. That's what woke me. Not a bang, but two little sounds. The legs going down one pair at a time, and then the deadbolt turning, so slow that it barely clicked. A woman who couldn't come up with my name could take the house apart in the dark without making a noise at all. I gave her about 15 seconds, then went after her. She was already across the yard. Nightgown, barefoot, moving. She was walking like a woman on a mission, going somewhere she'd been 1,000 times. Along the fence, through the gap in the laurel, down to the creek, and she never used a light. I followed by the moon and by that nightgown. Two things off that walk. One is the thread. Once we got across the creek and started climbing, I started seeing it. A red thread tied around branches about chest high, one every 20 or 30 yards. Faded on the low ones and bright on the high ones, which meant somebody had been doing this a long while, and they'd also been doing it lately. Miles of trail marked out in quilting thread by a woman who couldn't tell you what the year was. The other one is the nails. Where the trail crosses a little drainage, a seep, more than a branch. There were 7 of them drove into a down white oak on a line, all the way to the head. You put them where it comes across. The trail's not a trail, by the way. There's no trail behind that creek. I've had 2 forestry men and a game warden tell me so. What I was walking was the memory of one, and the higher we got, the more it acted like something one person had made by walking the exact same line for years. And the woods went quiet. Not night woods quiet. Night woods are loud. Night woods are about the loudest place in Georgia. This was the same thing as before, except now we were inside of it, and it seemed to stay with us, and the edge of it moved when we moved. I could hear the creek behind us and my own boots and her breathing 30 feet ahead of me. And under that, keeping time, something a lot bigger, slower, deeper. We came up over a shelf of rock and got into a stand of rhododendron so thick I had to go through it sideways, and then the trail quit, just ended, at a wall. A hump of gray limestone coming out of the mountain with roots over it and rhododendron packed in around it and moss up to my knees. Solid, blank, the kind of rock you just walk past 100 times and never look at. She got down to her knees in front of it, set a mason jar on the ground at the bottom of the stone, and turned the lid a little, like you'd loosen a jar to let something out. Then she put both hands flat on that rock and leaned her forehead on it. I've seen people pray. And it looked like that's what she was doing. The breathing was loud out here. It was coming out of the mountain. I could feel it in the ground through my boot, like a bass drum a few streets over. She said something I didn't quite catch. Then she stood up and turned around and looked right at me. And she was there. I mean all the way there. My grandmother, in her own eyes, first time in 2 years. "Dexter Ray, what in the world are you doing up here?" And before I could get anything out, her face changed. And it wasn't fear. It was closer to being embarrassed, like a woman caught buying something she can't afford. She said, "When I leave, it hurts less." Then she went past me and started down, and by the time we got to the creek, she was calling me Harold again. I went back for the jar the next morning in the daylight, with a thermos and a hatchet on my belt like that was going to be worth anything. The rock face was there, the rhododendron was there, the trail wasn't. I couldn't find it at all in the daylight. I walked that slope 3 hours and came down tore up by the briars. The jar was on the kitchen counter. I didn't carry it down. I know I didn't carry it down. But inside was a square of paper folded soft, and when I got it open, it was her handwriting. Her real handwriting, the schoolteacher cursive, not the block letters she started using. It said,
"When I forget, do not follow the breathing. If you find the cave, don't ask it to give me back."
Man, I tore that house apart looking for the rest of it. That's an ugly way to put it, but it's the right way. I waited till her afternoon nap, and then I went through my grandmother's house like a man robbing it. Closets, under the beds, the cedar chest. I got down in the crawl space on my belly with a flashlight in my teeth. I looked crazy, but I was desperate and wanted to find something that proved that maybe I wasn't so crazy. What did I find? 40 years of nothing. Tax papers, church bulletins, a shoebox of Harold's fishing licenses going back to 71. Why they needed to keep all this stuff, I have no idea. I even found her wedding dress in a bag with a receipt still pinned on it. Just like old people, I guess. Then, in the bottom of the hall closet, under a stack of quilts, there was a liquor box with the flaps folded over each other, and it was full of cassette tapes. I counted. There are 61 of them. 61 cassette tapes, all labeled in her hand. Just dates, mind you. The oldest one was 7 years back. 3 years before anybody in my family said the word dementia out loud. 4 years before the diagnosis. 5 years before we started taking turns. She knew. She knew before the doctors and before her own daughters even. And instead of telling anybody, she went to the drugstore in Delonia and bought a tape recorder. I sat on the floor of that hallway and I listened to every tape. I listened to them until dark. The early ones are just a woman talking, cheerful sounding, mostly. Groceries, weather, who died, what the deer got in the garden. She'd start each one with the date and
"This is Margaret Lewis."
like she was leaving somebody a message. Around the second year, they start to change. She starts testing herself out loud.
"Today is Tuesday the 9th. My granddaughters are Carol and Denise. My grandchildren are..."
And then the list. And she gets it right. And you can hear her be relieved about it. And then 30 seconds later, she says the whole list again, just to be sure. Around the fourth year, she starts saying a thing that made me cold sitting in that hallway. She'd get to the end of a tape and say, flat, with no drama in it at all,
"I don't believe this is a disease. I believe something is taking them."
and then she'd apologize for having said it. Every one of those tapes ends a little bit differently, and every one of them ends the same. What do I mean by that? Well, one cuts off mid-sentence. One ends with her getting up to answer the door. One is 4 minutes of a woman breathing in an empty kitchen and then saying, quietly,
"Oh, hey there."
It's different every time. But not one of them ends with her finishing a single thought. Every one ends in confusion. The last tape's from March, 14 seconds long. She says,
"Whoever's listening to this, I want you to know that I tried to leave you enough."
Then it's over. The notebook I found was in the piano bench under the hymnals. I'd sat on that bench twice a day for 2 weeks. It was spiral bound, cover gone, the front page in black marker pressed down so hard it came through 6 sheets. It said, "When I forget." It's not a diary. She worked out a system, my best guess. The front is lists, names with something beside each one. Carol in all caps. Hyphen. Oldest. Bossy. Loves me dearly. And then in all caps, Denise, hyphen. Quiet one. Nurse. And then Dexter Ray, hyphen. Denise's boy. Tall. Laughs like Harold. The middle is just rules. Block capitals, some of them traced over so many times they went through the paper. Lock before dark, all of them. The chair goes under the knob. If you wake up outside, walk downhill. Water runs home. Count the trees, 51. If it's not 51, do not go look for the one that is missing. Red thread is for finding the way back. It's not for finding the way there. Do not call anybody's name out there. It seems to learn them. It is not the devil. Stop asking it for things. And then, the back half. The back half is her losing. It was sad and hard to read. The writing goes from cursive to print to block capitals to something a kid would do. Entries on facing pages that seem to contradict each other. There's a page where she wrote Harold 40 times, filled it up from corner to corner, and then down at the bottom in little letters it says, I can see his hands. I can't see his face. There's one page in the good handwriting, the old school teacher cursive, that simply says, Today, I remember everything. Every bit of it. Our whole life together. I don't know why today. I'm going to write it all down, though, before it goes. And she does. 4 pages of it. The dress her mother made her, the mule's name, what Harold said the night he proposed, which is not romantic and is the funniest thing I have ever read. Then the next page, in the shaky block letters, by itself in the middle of all that white. I don't know who wrote that. Now the photographs. I'm not going to dress this up. If I did, you probably wouldn't believe it anyway. Those empty frames had been eating at me since the first night, so I went looking for where the pictures went. The albums were in the bottom of the china cabinet. 4 of them. The fat kind with the sticky pages and the plastic sheet over the top. You know the kind. Most of it was fine. Church picnics, my mother with a bad haircut, Harold on a tractor, and then Christmas pictures. Christmas and Christmas and Christmas and Christmas. Some of them were blank. They weren't gone. They weren't peeled out. You can tell when a picture's been pulled out of one. You can tell when a picture's been pulled off one of those sticky pages, you know? There's a clean spot where the glue didn't yellow. That's not what this was, though. The paper was still down in the sleeve. Photograph paper, right thickness, little white border, the drugstore printing on the back, date stamped in the corner. And the front of it was just gray. They weren't faded even, because faded pictures have a ghost in them. They were just the color of a photograph that never had anything on it. 11 of them across 4 albums. I took one into her and sat down beside her and just asked her, Grandma, what happened to this picture? She looked at it. I gotta admit, she was in a bad hour. She couldn't have told you my name right then, but she looked at that gray rectangle a good while. And then she said, Oh, that's the one with all of us on the porch. Do you remember it? No, honey, nobody does. Nobody does. Not I don't. Not I can't. She said it like a fact about the world. The same way you'd say nobody lives out at the old Dyer place anymore. I called my mom that night and asked her about a picture of the whole family on Grandma's porch. She said she didn't think there ever was one. She said they talked about getting everybody together for one and never did do it. I stood in that kitchen with the phone in my ear, and that was the first time I understood this wasn't something happening inside one old woman's head. The pictures didn't go blank because she forgot them. They went blank because everybody did. That's the part that got me. It still does. It's not that the memories go. It's that they go so clean there's nobody left to notice they were ever there in the first place. Now forgive me, but I'm going to have to start telling this a little different. I found those tapes on a Tuesday. That's clean. That's efficient. I've got that. Found the notebook the same night. And then there's some of October I just don't have. I'd started keeping my own notebook by then. God help me. I'd started copying her system. The entries run through the 6th of October, and then there's a page with a grocery list on it, and the next dated entry is the 19th. 13 days. Somewhere in the middle of all that, in my handwriting, on a page with no date on it, it just says, Went up. It's colder than you think. The names go all the way around. 13 days. What happened to those 13 days? There are things I know that happen in there because there's proof. For instance, I put 406 miles on the truck. I know that because I wrote down the odometer on the 6th. I'd like to say that was smart of me, but it was probably just nerves, to be honest. I bought 2 flashlights, 100 feet of rope, and a headlamp at the Ace in Bologna. There's a receipt for it dated on the 12th. I don't have any memory of buying any of that stuff. I've been back in that store since and stood in the aisle, and you know what I felt? Absolutely nothing. My boots came back with red clay ground down in the welt, all the way in. That doesn't happen in the yard. And somewhere in there, I got a cut across my right palm, straight and clean, the kind you get grabbing something you shouldn't have grabbed. It was already scabbed and going white around the edges by the time I noticed it. So I asked her, I said, "Grandma, do you know where I've been?" She was having a bad afternoon. She looked up at me from her chair, a little afraid of me, the way she'd get sometimes, and she said, "Have we met?" The week before that, she had said, "I thought you'd be older." And a month before that, she'd look at me over breakfast and say, "Have we met?" And then laugh at herself and said, "Of course we have, Sugarfoot. Come sit down." But she wasn't laughing this time. So I'm standing there with a healing cut on my hand and 13 days missing, and my own handwriting saying the names go all the way around. And here's the part that tells you how the whole thing works. I wasn't even scared. I was comfortable with it. Something in me had already decided that the missing days were just fine, and whatever I did up there was just fine. It didn't feel like a hole. It felt like a room in the house that I'd quit going into. Maybe because something died in there, but it was a room that didn't even feel shut. It just wasn't a door I used anymore. It doesn't take a bite out of you and leave you bleeding. It takes the part that would have noticed. She came back one more time, all the way back. Cold, clear night at the end of October, and I'd built a fire because the wood stove finally seemed worth the trouble. She came out of her room at 10 o'clock, wide awake, and sat down across from me and said, "Dexter Ray, we need to talk while I've got it." I could tell she put her face on. She had earrings on. And I've never moved so fast in my life. I got the tape recorder off the hall table, got it running, and then followed her out to the front porch, where we sat down with tea. And then I started the recording, and I didn't interrupt her one time. She looked like she was ready to go to church. She had her Sunday best on, a blue dress with golden earrings, and she had put her face on for the first time since I had gotten there. We talked for 2 hours and 11 minutes, sitting on that front porch, listening to the cicadas, drinking peach sweet tea out of glasses. She said it started the winter after Harold died, that the grief wasn't like people say it is. Everybody kept telling her it would get lighter, and it kept getting heavier. And she got to where she couldn't even be in a room with his coat hanging up anymore. She told me about the first night she heard the breathing. She said she wasn't scared of it. She said it sounded lonesome, and she was almost apologetic about saying that. She said she followed it because she wanted it to be Harold. She knew it wasn't him, but she went anyway. She said the cave doesn't do anything to you. In her words, "It's not a trick, honey. Everybody wants it to be a trick, something like in a movie. But there wasn't any bargain. Nobody wrote anything down. I just went in there and I hurt so bad in my heart. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't do anything. So I just put my hands on the stone and I said out loud, 'I can't carry this anymore.'" She stopped and just looked out into the distance. "And then I couldn't," she said. "Just like that. I walked out of there and the weight was gone, and the sun came up and I made biscuits. It was the first morning in 14 months that I woke up and made biscuits. It was the first time I woke up and I wasn't grieving." I wiped the tears from my eyes and then asked her, point blankly, I asked her what it cost. "The night we got married, it rained. I know that because Carol told me. I've been told about it, but I don't have it." She said the first few times she didn't understand what she was giving up. She thought she was leaving pain up there, but it took her 2 years to work out that the pain was attached to something. That you can't take out the ache of missing a man without taking some of that man out as well. "Grief is just love with nowhere to go," she said. So when I gave it the grief, I was just handing it to him, A little bit at a time. And I did it, Dexter. Nobody made me, but I kept going back. And then she said the thing I'll hear in my head, probably until I'm dead. Pain was where part of the love lived. She reached over and put a folded page in my shirt pocket and patted it flat. Don't read that yet, honey, she said. And I said, Grandma, not yet. You'll know. Those are probably the best 2 hours and 11 minutes of my entire life. At the end, she just looked at me and said, whatever it does to me, you don't ask it for anything. You hear me? Not one thing. The breathing that night was louder than usual.
Folks, I apologize. The reel has...
You always hated silence.
Marianne.
Do you remember our bedroom?
Yes.
What color were the curtains?
Yellow.
No.
Blue.
No.
I don't...
Do you remember the song we danced to at our wedding?
Of course I do.
Then sing it.
I can't remember the words.
You cannot remember the words because you have been feeding them to this place.
That isn't true.
Every story you tell costs you something. Every broadcast takes another piece. Where did we live after we married?
Savannah.
No.
Brunswick.
No.
Stop it.
What was my mother's name?
Stop.
What did I say to you before I died?
Stop asking me.
What did you put into my medicine, Jonah?
I didn't put anything in it.
Then why did you hide the bottle?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You remember the empty bottle.
No.
You remember carrying me down the stairs.
No.
You remember Studio B.
I had never been to this station before the storm.
That is the first lie it gave you. You did not find whaintradio in 1976. You returned to it.
Returned?
You brought me here.
Why would I?
You said it could preserve a voice forever. You said death would not have the final word. You said you could save me. But you only saved the part of me that hated you.
Marianne.
Come downstairs, and I will show you the rest.
How do I know you're really her?
Because you still cannot remember how the song ends.
Please tell me what happened.
Open the door.
Tell me first.
Open the door.
Marianne.
Open the door. Open the door. That is not the date I died. That is the date he brought me back.
I woke up and realized Grandma was gone. I investigated. The chair was down, the deadbolt turned. The front door was standing open on white frost. One set of narrow bare footprints going off the porch and across the yard towards the trees. And beside them, the big ones, toes spread wide, coming down out of the woods, and then turning and walking along with her. I spent a moment staring at those footprints. Now there's a thing I have to tell you. Lewis feet are very distinctive. Whether it's mine, my brother's, or my father's, we all have the flattest feet you've ever seen. Absolutely no arch at all. As if we were biologically engineered to swim rather than walk. They're very distinctive. And when I looked down, I stared at those footprints and realized they were the same flat feet. Now, either one of my relatives has been out that night walking around the yard, or I was staring at my footprints and just did not realize it. I realized at that moment that they were the same footprints I saw when I first came upon the house. I stared at those footprints, realized that they went together as far as the fence, and then the frost gave out on the leaf litter, and I couldn't track either one of them anymore. I was terrified. I drove to Elias Morgan's place with my hands shaking so bad I had to hold the wheel down at the bottom. Got out, and he was already on the porch with his boots on. He didn't ask me what happened. He looked at my face and then went into the house and came back with a coil of rope, a canvas satchel, and a 2-pound coffee can that rattled. He said, "I hoped I'd die before anybody asked me." And then he got into the truck. We went up behind the creek, and the trail was there for him. I'd been on that slope in daylight and found absolutely nothing. But Elias put his hand on a rhododendron limb and looked up the hill and said, "There." And after that, there was a trail, a plain one, and I could see the red thread going up ahead of us. 2 hours of climbing, steep and wet, in that gray November light that comes down through bare hardwood and doesn't seem to warm anything up. Around 11 o'clock, the woods went quiet, and I watched him notice it, and he never broke stride. He talked while we walked, and I think he did that for me. He said his granddad was born in 1897 and had known people born before the removal, and that some of what he was about to say came down through them and had got worn smooth in the telling. He said the old people had a name for the place, not for the cave, but for the place itself. Tsulawé. He said his granddad told him it meant something like, "the place that weaves," but he'd never met anybody who could swear to it, and the ones who could were gone. And then he told it to me the way it came down to him. He said before these mountains were mountains, back when they were higher and sharper, there was already something under them. It wasn't a god. He said nobody ever said it was a god. Not a devil either, and he was firm about that. He said it was a keeper. He said the Cherokee called it the Weaver. He said it didn't come here and it wasn't put here. It's here like the water is here, and it does one thing the way that water does one thing. It gathers up what others let go of. He said the old people believe that when a thing is forgotten by everybody, not misplaced, but let go, all the way, by every mind that ever had it, it doesn't turn into nothing. It has to go somewhere, so it goes down through the leaf mold and the clay and the limestone, and it collects. And something down there gathers it up and keeps it so nothing is ever lost for good. He said some of them thought it was just mercy, a great mercy, that there's a place where every forgotten thing is kept whole and safe forever. Like a RAID system compared to modern day, or an extra storage drive, I guess. He said others thought it had gone wrong a long time back. Because a thing that lives on what other people let go of does all right as long as people don't come to it on purpose. But people hurt. And people, when they hurt bad enough, will let go of things they've got no business letting go of. And once it learned grief would walk a person up that mountain and put their hands on the stone and offer it. It didn't have to wait on the rest of the world forgetting anymore. I asked him if it was evil. He walked another 20 yards before he answered me. "Son, is a sinkhole evil?" And then he said, "It don't hunt. It don't give chase. And all the tellings I ever heard, not one time does it come and try to get anybody. It just waits. It's the waitingest thing there ever was. And everybody that ever went in there on their own 2 feet, asking for something." Then he said the thing that's on the inside cover of my notebook now. The mountain don't take, it accepts. The trail ended at the rock face. Same gray limestone, same rhododendron, solid. Elias stood there with his hands on his hips and said, "Well, I lost 20 minutes on that wall. I ran my hands all over it. Got down on my belly at the bottom of it, pried at the moss. There was no seam, no draft, no gap. It was a rock on a hillside. And I started coming apart right there because my grandmother was out in the cold, and this was all that I had." He let me do it, and then he finally said, "Dexter, come sit down, son." So I sat down. He handed me the thermos. "Now quit looking at it. I said, "What?" "Look at me. Look at the ground. Drink that coffee and just think about something else." So I sat on a wet rock with my back half turned to it, looking at a dead fern, thinking about nothing much. Thinking about my mother's phone call. Thinking about that bag of ice sweating on my leg in a Kroger parking lot. And the light changed. I felt it before I turned around. The air at my back dropped off cold, like a door opening on a walk-in cooler, and I could smell it. I smelled cold, wet rock and old rope, and under that, a faint smell of peaches. I turned around. The mouth of it was right there. 6 foot high, wide as a barn door, going back into the hill at a little down angle. Dark past about 15 feet in. It had been there the whole time. That's what I just can't get around. There was moss growing on the inside lip of it that had been growing for years, but nothing opened. It was a thing my eyes wouldn't take, over and over. The way you can look straight at your keys. White threads across the opening. It wasn't a web, nothing that neat. It was like loose strands hanging down and slack curves off the roof of the mouth, catching light like frost on a wire. Elias didn't even get up. "I'll be right here. I ain't going in there, and I ain't sorry about it." He handed me the coffee can. Inside it was 7 of those square nails, a book of paper matches, and a little jar of something black that smelled like pine tar. "If it starts to feel real good in there, you come out. That's the only advice worth a damn. Not if it feels bad, bad's fine, but you come out when it starts feeling good." Inside, the mountain was breathing. The walls were breathing. In my headlamp, out at the edges, you could see the limestone move. Up and back down, maybe an inch, slow, like a man sleeping. Every 11 seconds, I even timed it. Don't know why I timed it, except I was scared, and counting gives you something to do. The passage went down and got bigger and kept getting bigger. That's what wrecked my sense of scale with this. The light quit reaching the ceiling, and then it quit reaching the walls, and my footsteps quit coming back to me. And then I figured out I was in a room the size of a church, and then realized it was even bigger than that. There was silk everywhere. Not cobwebs, nothing sticky, nothing tangled, none of that geometry that a spider does. More like just single strands, most of them, running floor to ceiling and wall to wall in long, slack curves. Some of them were 100 feet long, thinner than fishing line and bright. They took my headlamp and then gave it back doubled. There were thousands of them, tens of thousands. And when I walked through them, they didn't break and they didn't stick to me. They went around me, just went around like tall grass sometimes does. And the whole place was warm. The names were on the left-hand wall, and they went as far as my light would carry and up past where I could see. All of them were cut into the rock. The low ones, knee-high and under, weren't in any alphabet, just marks. Bunches of lines, some of them about wore out of the stone, and I couldn't tell you what they said, and I don't believe anybody living could either. Above those seemed to be Cherokee, the syllabary, cut clean and careful. Above that was English, and you could read that county going up the wall like flood marks on a bridge piling. Emma Pritchard, 1906. William Harper, 1948. Doris Hayes, 1977. Lois Ray. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Some of them cut careful, like on a headstone. Others gouged out fast and crooked and deep by somebody in a hurry, or somebody crying. I don't know. And some of them were half gone. It's like they were erased from the inside out. Letters going thin and patchy, and the stone smoothing itself over the way skin closes up over a splinter. Then I found my granddad's. Harold Lewis, about shoulder height, cut deep and even, and something under the H that might have been a date, but you couldn't read it anymore. I put my hand on it. And about 8 inches over to the right, I found hers. Margaret L. Lewis. The Margaret was solid. The rest of it was soft. The L in the Lewis about half there, edges rounding off, and I stood there with my light on my grandmother's name, and then watched the bottom of that last S close up a little, like a footprint in wet sand. I got my knife out. I don't even remember deciding to do that, but I got my pocket knife out and started trying to cut her name back into that wall deeper, and the blade skated off that limestone like it was cast iron, and I broke the tip off it and cut my hand, and I stood there bleeding on a wall while my grandmother's name went out under my hands. And that's when my light swung down the wall a ways and stopped. I saw it. Chest height, fresh cut, bright white in the gray, no dust down in the grooves, edges still sharp on it. Dexter Ray Lewis. I don't have the words for what that felt like. It wasn't fear, not at first. It was more like I just recognized something. My hand came up and my thumb went into the D and it fit. And my arm knew the motion of having made those letters, the way your hand knows your own signature. The cut on my palm was 10 days old, and it was right where a knife handle sits. Those 13 days in October. I remembered the words now. Went up. It's colder than you think. The names go all the way around. I had already been there. I stood right in that spot and cut my own name into that wall, and then walked home and made my grandmother her supper and never even knew it. And I wasn't even scared standing there. It scares me now, it terrifies me. What I felt was settled, like I was searching for my keys and suddenly found them. That's how far along I already was. There were things set out all down the bottom of that wall. Not treasure, nothing anybody would want. Just wedding rings, dozens of them actually, some silver, most not, laying there in the dust. A child's shoe, one, the little brown lace-up kind from way back. Pocket watches, reading glasses, a whole row of mason jars with zinc lids gone chalky, and peach pits and creek stones and folded paper inside. Baby socks, a stack of letters swelled up with damp and tied with a shoelace, a harmonica, a tobacco tin with somebody's teeth in it, and Grandpa's pocket knife. Bone handle, blade broke off at the tip. Exactly the way I remember it laying in his hand out in the driveway while he worked on the mower. None of it was piled up like loot. It was set out like a mantle, like somebody arranged it that way. People came up that mountain and gave away a memory, and then afterwards carried something up here and set it down, not to pay for it, more like an apology. Then the silk started doing what it does, and I sat down on the floor of that cave and didn't get up for a while. The strand up near my head went from bright to milky all at once. It looked like frost going across a windshield in winter. There was something in it. I saw a woman in a kitchen with her hair up in a scarf, laughing so hard she had to put her hand on the counter. 2 seconds of it maybe. And it wasn't a picture and it wasn't a movie either. I had the inside of it there. I knew what her hands smelled like. I knew she was laughing at somebody just out of the frame that she loved enough to be mean to sometimes. Then it thinned out and went dark, and it was just a thread again. They started going all around me, all at once, no order to them. All through that room and up in the dark where I couldn't see, and even down along the floor. I saw a man teaching a girl how to hold a rod, somebody's first dance, some gymnasium, crepe paper, a funeral in the rain and everybody's shoes, a boy running down a row of corn, somebody's last conversation with an old man in a bed saying, well, all right then, and meaning it. Thousands of them flickering on and off across 100 yards of darkness, like a town seen from an airplane at night. Every one of those belonged to somebody who doesn't have it anymore, and they're still in there. Right now, even tonight, while you're listening to this story, they're still down there. And that's the whole thing right there. It's not a monster. It's a lost and found, and nobody's coming. 50 feet in from that wall, the floor dips down, and there's a peach tree growing out of the rock. Roots down into the limestone and gone out of sight, full grown, 15 feet of it, in leaf, in November, in a cave, with no light on it of any kind, and it had fruit on it. That's what I had smelled at the mouth of the cave. That's what I'd been smelling for a month. In the hall, in the kitchen at 3 a.m, that ripe smell that had no business being anywhere in that house in the fall. My grandmother was sitting at the bottom of it with her back against the trunk, barefoot, in her nightgown, in the cold, hands folded in her lap, looking into those branches like a woman at a window. I got down on my knees in front of her, and then I said her name about 40 times. She came back a little, not all the way, but enough. She looked at me. There wasn't any fear in her at all. She just said, "Isn't it pretty?" I said, "Grandma, we've got to go. Harold planted that one." I told her it wasn't real. I was crying. I was hysteric. I said, "Grandma, that's not real. It's not a real tree. It's not him." And she said, very quietly, "I know it, honey." She put her hand up on that bark flat, same as she did every morning on the south slope. "It's what's left of him, though," she said. "It kept it for me when I couldn't." And then she said, "That was kind, wasn't it?" "I think that was meant as kindness." I looked up. "No matter what I tell you, it won't be enough. I will not be able to give real, accurate words to what I saw in that cave. You have to understand that ceiling is probably 40, 50, 60 feet up in most places. My light didn't even reach it. But off to the left and up, the dark had something in it. It was thicker there than the dark around it, and it was moving. And then a leg came down. That's all, one leg. It came down out of the ceiling about 60 feet off and set its point on the floor. And the point wasn't a foot or a claw. It went off into filaments, dozens of them, fine as hair, and they spread out on the stone and settled. That leg was as long as a span of power line. It was pale, translucent in some places, so I could make out the shape of the leg behind it, through it. Then something shifted up there, and I saw the entire underside of a body that you could have put a house inside of. And those eyes, several of them, black and faceted, in an arrangement I couldn't hold in my head to look at. They didn't reflect my headlamp. I had 400 lumens on that thing, and its eyes came back flat black, like holes just cut in the picture. It seemed to be looking at the place where I was feeling something. I was reminded of the way my parents' dog looked at the doorway even before their car pulled in, waiting for them. It made a strange sound, and it made it twice. Like a knitting needle set down on a table or something. And then it breathed, right after I did. Standing in the biggest room I'll ever be in, with the biggest living thing I'll ever see. And it had been standing out at my grandmother's fence line for years, matching a stranger's breathing through a wall. Not because it wanted us, not because it wanted me, but because that's just how it waits. It listens for the shape of a person, and then it holds still and it lets you come to it. It never came one step closer. I got my arms up under her and I picked her up. She didn't weigh anything, like a bundle of kindling. And I backed out of there with my light on that ceiling the whole way, and it didn't follow me. It never chased me. Last thing I saw was the silk, filling up with light all across the dark, on and off, on and off. Somebody's wedding, somebody's dog, somebody's mother, young, turning around to face me. She set it against my shoulder, so quietly I just about lost it under my own boots. Names forget too, honey. And then a little further down, she said, "Don't you ask it for anything." Elias was sitting right where I left him. He got up, and when he saw us coming out, he took his cap off. He didn't ask me one question. Not going down, not in the truck either, not ever. Halfway down the mountain, with her wrapped up in his coat and my back hollering at me, I turned around and looked. There wasn't any opening, just a hump of gray rock with moss on it and rhododendron packed in all around it. I went back 4 times that winter, once with Elias, twice by myself, and once with a fellow from the state who does karst survey and was real kind to me about the whole thing. There's no cave on that ridge. There's no void under it. The equipment even says there's 200 feet of just solid rock. So I just don't argue with people about it anymore. Grandma lived 7 more weeks. They were good weeks mostly, in the way those weeks can be good. She was gone more than she was there. She called me Harold, and she called me Dexter, and one whole afternoon she called me Sugarfoot and told me about a candy dish shaped like a swan. And I sat there and let her hand me back a piece of my great-grandmother that she should not have been able to reach. The breathing quit after that day. I never heard it again at that house. I'd like to say it was because it got what it came for. I don't think that's right either. I think it just went back to waiting. Somewhere in the middle of those 7 weeks, I started reading to her at night. I don't remember deciding to do that either. She'd go down hard around 8 o'clock, and then she'd wake up scared around 11, hollering for people that weren't in the room, and some that weren't anywhere anymore. And I'd go sit on the edge of that bed, and I'd take her hand, and she'd quiet down some, but not all the way. My voice didn't mean much to her by then. I don't know that my face did either. So one night, I got the notebook off the piano bench and brought it in and sat down in the chair by her bed, and I opened it to the front. There wasn't an idea so much as I'd run out of things to try. I said, "Grandma, I'm just going to read you something." And I read her own list. Carol, oldest, bossy, loves me. Denise, quiet one, nurse. Dexter Ray, Denise's boy, tall, laughs like Harold. She went still. She didn't seem scared, though, so I went on. I read her the rules, the ones she traced over so many times the paper had gone thin. Locked before dark, all of them. She nodded along to that one like it was a hymn, the words getting to her before I finished saying them. Count the trees, 51. Her hand moved on the quilt like she was touching bark. I read her the page where she wrote Harold 40 times, corner to corner, and down at the bottom, I can see his hands. I can't see his face. And she said, plain as anything, not even looking at me, but looking up at the ceiling, "I can see his face now, honey." I had to quit for a minute after that one. It got to be the thing we did. Every night around 9, I'd take that notebook in and sit in the chair and read her back to herself, a few pages at a time, whatever I opened up to. There wasn't an order that made it better or worse. It was just all her. Some nights I read her the 4 good pages. The day she remembered everything. The dress her mother made, the mule's name, what Harold said the night he proposed, which is not romantic, and which I read out loud to a dying woman at 11 o'clock at night, and she laughed at it every single time like she'd never heard it, which she hadn't. I never read her the last page, the one that said, "I don't know who wrote that." I turned past it real quick, and she never asked. Towards the end, she couldn't always follow the words as words, but she'd follow the sound of it, and her hand would find mine on top of the quilt and hold on. And every now and then, she'd say a line back to me half a second before I got to it, out of somewhere underneath all of it, that she hadn't completely lost yet. The next to last night I spent with her, I read her the rules again because that page settled her best. And I got to the part where it says, "Do not call anybody's name out there. It learns them." And she squeezed my hand. Hard. Harder than I thought she had in her. "You're doing so good, Dexter Ray." And then she said, "Keep reading. I like hearing what I knew." So I did. I read till she was asleep. And then I sat there a while with the book open on my knee. It was the only thing I had left to give her, and she'd written it herself. All I was doing was carrying it back across the room. She went in her sleep, in her own bed, on the 11th of January. When I came in that morning, her hands were up to her chest, and she had the notebook in one and a picture of Harold in the other. A real one that still had him in it. Him at about 30, squinting, hat pushed back, standing in a field that was going to be the orchard. I don't know where she got that picture. Every frame in that house was empty, and I'd been through every box in it twice. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not knowing. At the funeral, Elias stood up in the back of the church and didn't say much, which is what everybody seemed to want. Afterward, he found me out by the cars, shook my hand, and then held on to it for a second. The mountain's always going to breathe. But that doesn't mean you have to answer. He died that next spring. Heart. He was 81. His grandson called me because I was in his address book under Dexter, Margaret's boy. There was a coffee can of square nails on the seat of his truck. I stayed. I don't even think I remember deciding to stay. One day it was February and I was still there, and I'd fixed the porch and rehung the kitchen door so it shut square. I quit putting the chair under the knob for about a week, and then started back, and I've never quit since. I still lock up before dark, all of them. I took over the orchard. 51 is what Harold planted, and 51 is not what was standing when I got there. I counted 44. I walked those rows 100 times looking for stumps, and there just weren't any. There's no bare spots either. The rows close up over where they were like the ground never held them. I put in 7 new ones that first spring. They're not the same trees, I know that, but I did it anyway. And then I started writing them down. That's what I do now. Every tree on that slope has got a card in a filed box on the kitchen table with the year on it and whatever story I could get out of my mother or my aunt or somebody at church. The 61 tree is the one that Harold planted when he was drunk, and it leans. The 74 tree is the one my mother fell out of and broke her wrist and then lied about how she did it. The 88 tree came out of a pit that she spit into a napkin at a barbecue because the peach was that good and she wanted more of them. 12 of the cards are blank. I leave the blank ones in the box. A blank card still says there was something there. That's about the only thing anybody's got against that mountain. The names it takes are the ones that nobody wrote down. Last fall, I tried to make her cobbler. I've got the recipe. It's in the front of the notebook in the good handwriting, and it's a fine recipe, and I've made it a dozen times now. And in the middle of the list it says cinnamon, but it doesn't say how much. She never wrote it because she never needed it. 50 years she'd been making that cobbler with her hand and never needed a spoon, or a measuring cup for that matter. I stood in that kitchen with the tin in my hand a good while trying to remember watching her do it. I've seen it 100 times. I could see her hands. I could see the yellow bowl. I just couldn't come up with how much cinnamon went into it. 1 teaspoon, 2 teaspoons, and I stood there just feeling that, and I felt my heart ache, feeling the edge of it, feeling the sharpness to it, and I thought about how easy it'd be just to walk up that ridge and put my hands on that stone and just ask. But that's how it gets you. Not with anything scary, but with a Tuesday afternoon and some little thing you can't stand not having. I laughed out loud in an empty house, and then I just guessed. 2. It was wrong. Way too much. And it fought the peaches, and the whole pan came out a little off. Then I sat on the back steps. I ate it while looking at the orchard, and you better believe I ate all of it. I've made it wrong 5 times now. I'll probably make it wrong for the rest of my life, and that's all right. I accept that. Making it wrong is how I know I'm the one making it. 2 summers after she died, I read the folded page. It had been in the drawer of the hall table since the night she put it in my pocket. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. Truth is, I was afraid of it. I figured it'd be a warning or instructions or something I'd done wrong. I got it out one evening in July for no reason at all and then opened it up. I wasn't prepared for it. 7 lines in that schoolteacher cursive, written some night years before I came home. back when she still had enough of herself left to sit at that table and think about who'd be the one to find it. It just says, "If you're reading this, then you remembered me long enough. That's all I ever wanted, honey. Don't go up there for me. I'm not up there. I'm in the kitchen. I'm in the trees. Love doesn't need remembering. It just needs somebody to keep doing it." I sat on that porch with that in my hands till it got too dark to see it. So that's it. I don't have an ending for you. Not the kind you want. Nothing got killed. Nothing got fixed. There's no widow's cave on record in that county, and there's no weaver in any book of folklore I've been able to turn up. And the one man who could have told you more about it is buried in the same churchyard as my grandmother, about 40 feet apart, which I like. I'm 31 now. I still live in that house. I still walk the orchard every morning and put my hand on every trunk going down the line, all 51 of them. And I couldn't tell you when I started doing that. Some nights, not many, 4 or 5 a year, and always in the fall, I'll be out on the porch and the crickets will quit in a patch up on the hill. And then it starts. In and out, slow, half a beat behind me. It doesn't want anything off me. I've come around to that. It's not hunting and it's not calling me and there's nothing personal in it. It's not up there doing the one thing it does. It's just up there doing the thing it does. Same as rain does the one thing rain does, taking up everything this world sets down and forgets it's set down. Some nights I get up and I go in and lock all of them and put the chair under the knob. Some nights I stay out there a while and tip my hat towards the ridge, not out of fear. I don't know what to call it. One thing acknowledging another thing, maybe. And then I go in and open that file box and I write something down. It doesn't matter what. How my mother says Wednesday. The name of, or yesterday. Or the name of Elias Morgan's dog. That my grandmother, at 84 years old, with almost nothing left in her, could still tell you every single thing there is to know about a Georgia peach. People think healing means forgetting. That you're supposed to get to where it doesn't hurt anymore. But I don't believe that. The people we love don't disappear when the memory starts going. They disappear when there's nobody left willing to do the remembering. So I remember. I remember all of it. The good and the rest of it. Especially the rest of it. The 11 months I couldn't say my granddad's name out loud without stopping. The morning they found her out on the road with her hands cupped like she was carrying water. The sound she made the last time she looked at me and didn't know who I was. I keep all of it. Because pain was where part of the love lived, and I've got no intention of giving that away. If you hear breathing out past your light, it isn't the wind. Don't answer it.
There are things we hold because we love them. And there are things we hold because we're afraid of who we might become without them. A photograph, a voice on an old recording, a shirt that still smells faintly like someone who is gone. I think that might be worse than death, to carry love after losing every memory of where it came from. I have spent a long time telling myself that the past cannot hurt me if I refuse to look at it. But the past does not need our permission. It waits, behind doors, inside songs, underneath the voices of people we once loved. Mary Ann is waiting, or something wearing her voice is waiting. Either way, I can't keep sitting here pretending I don't hear her. For those of you listening, I don't know what happens to the broadcast after I leave this room. I don't know whether the microphone will remain open. I don't know whether I will come back. But if you hear something, if another voice begins speaking from this station, listen carefully. It may know things about me that I don't. But knowing a man's memories and telling the truth about him are not necessarily the same thing. All right, Mary Ann, you win.
Jonah,
I'm here.
you said that before.
Mary Ann, before I open this door, I need you to answer one question. Did I murder you?
Which time?
Mary Ann, listen to me. Whatever comes through that microphone, it isn't you anymore.
Then why does it remember what you did? Jonah, I'm still alive. Now remember me.
Tonight I found your picture folded in my old coat sleeve, the same one I wore that autumn day. You married me beneath the tree. You always loved my letters, said they brought home back to you. So I found one more empty page and wrote like I used to do. So I'll write another letter like I always said I'd do, knowing no one's gonna read it except maybe you. Every page still says I love you. Every line still bears your name. If heaven has a mailbox, write me back someday. Coffee's still too bitter, I still drink it black each day. If I could spend 1 hour with you, I'd trade this world away. I still wear the ring you gave me. It catches on the microphone. Funny how a little band of gold can keep a man from feeling alone. So I'll write another letter like I always said I'd do, knowing no one's gonna read it except maybe you. Every page still says I love you. Every line still bears your name. if heaven has a mailbox, write me back someday. The roof still leaks when storms roll in. You'd laugh and tell me how. Jonah, quit pretending you know, then fix it somehow. I never told you about this station. Maybe that's for the best. You tell me, come on home, my love, and let the silence rest. 43 letters in the drawer, everyone began the same. Dear Marianne, everyone signed my name. Then one morning they were gone, not a single page inside. Maybe someone carried them somewhere past the night. So I'll write another letter till these old hands can't hold a pen. Love's the only thing I've learned that never truly ends. If you ever hear this broadcast from somewhere I can't see, save a little place beside you, keep my letters until you come for me.